Nick, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, Angus. How are you?
Yeah, we're good, thanks, Nick. We're very jealous of you, though.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm enjoying myself probably a little bit too much here, but it's a place where it's hard not to. Santa Anita. It's beautiful here, but I should stress it's not uncomfortably hot. It's probably around about late 70s, early 80s, and it's about as hot as it's going to get. So it shouldn't be too uncomfortable for the Europeans, and not a cloud in the sky, as you can imagine.
Oh, thanks for stressing that, Nick. It's lashing it down here.
I'm sorry, Captain.
What can you tell us, Nick? We've been talking about the 3 races here on the show. We've done 3 races thus far. We've talked about the Turf, the Mile, and the Classic. And we talked to Richard Thomas of William Hill earlier on. He was telling us that Celebration, who will run in the Mile, of course, and is favourite at 6-4, had a step out on the track today and got pretty warm. Did you manage to see him?
Yeah, I did. It's not uncommon for the Aidan O'Brien horses because they tend to arrive later. So today's the first time you get a look at them out on the track as they're quarantined for a couple of days longer. I remember when I first came to Santa Anita in 2003 and his horses all came out and they all washed out and everyone said, well, they can't possibly win. And Long Crest, I remember, was the worst. And she ran a career best to finish second in the filly and mare turf, and then High Chaparral dead heated in the turf. So I never get too worried about it. Aidan does it his way, really. He just does things slightly differently to the rest of the Europeans who get here earlier in the week. And they were getting warm. Fame and Glory got especially warm out on the track this morning, but it wouldn't worry me unduly, really. And Big Celebration, I thought, looked in good nick, considering how recently he ran and how much he put into that race at Ascot. And I think that is what the connections of the main opponents, Wise Dan and Moonlight Cloud, are clinging to, really. That Big Celebration might have put quite a lot into that mile win at Ascot, and he might bounce accordingly. But he's a horse who's proven his toughness over and over again.
It's quite a quick turnaround for him, isn't it, after running a big time at Ascot as well. The Americans love this Wise Dan, don't they? They think he's going to win.
Well, they're stemming, Angus. I know how you like form stemming. And, of course, they're looking at Wise Dan's margin over Cityscape in Canada relative to Acceleration's margin over Cityscape in both the Jacques Lemois and the QE2. So they think they might get Acceleration. It's going to be a great race to watch tactically, the Mile, isn't it? Because there's not that many runners, so it shouldn't be the usual carnage. It should be quite a pure race, and it's the race that's most full of quality. It's probably got the 3 best horses in the whole meeting in there, save Royal Delta perhaps. And it's just a question of how far John Velasquez wants to sit off the leader, I think. There's an obvious pace setter in the race, and if Velasquez doesn't sit too far off, I think he'll think he might be able to get the jump on the Europeans from a furlong and a half down. And he'd be a dangerous horse to give any start to, I would have thought.
Yes, it's an interesting year in that the Americans think that they've got a chance of winning a couple of races on the turf with Wise Dan and then point of entry as well. In fact, it's an unusual year when that happens.
Yeah, there's no doubt the Americans think Wise Dan, in terms of pure class, is their best shot of winning a turf race. And seasoned American observers I've been talking to say he is the best American turf horse since Lure, who of course won back-to-back Breeders' Cup miles back in the 90s. That's quite a bold statement. You're talking the best American turf miler for 20 years. But then again, you could make a pretty cogent case that Acceleration is, if not the best, one of the best Europeans ever sent to the Breeders' Cup mile. He certainly is on ratings. He's the highest rated horse officially that Aidan O'Brien's trained. And Freddie Head believes, and told me this morning, Moonlight Cloud is the best horse in the race. And it's a bold call, but he might not be wrong. If you take the Maurice de Geest and then you argue that she could have finished very close to Acceleration in the Jacques Lemois with a clear run, he might not be too far. I think she looks fantastic. I think she's trained really well. It's everything about her demeanour, the way she's carried herself here, is really positive. And if I was going to have a bet in the race, I think I'd just win bet her at 5, where there is still any 5-1 around. I'm not sure there is.
OK, so the Americans are legitimately keen about Wise Dan. Do you think they're overrating Point of Entry, who is favourite for the turf, just ahead of St Nicholas Abbey?
It's hard to say they're overrating because he's done everything asked of him, but he's beaten Treasure Beach a handful of times, and I think we all think we know what that means. I suppose our problem in the turf is that neither St Nicholas Abbey nor Charetta comes here off anything like the perfect preparation. It's not their fault the ground was so terrible at Longchamp, but it's a question of whether both of them, having had long, hard seasons, they can come here fresh enough to give of their best. Because if they did, you'd fancy them. But Point of Entry's just had a much better preparation, really. And I tell you, he is a horse that really looks the part. He's a a lovely, big, imposing horse. Quite whether he'll handle the downhill start to the race as well as one or two others is a moot point, I suppose. But he certainly looks the part, and he looks in good shape as well. By contrast, the Japanese contender for the race, Trailblazer, who I half fancied off the back of a good prep last time, he's been looping the loop in the morning and hasn't been behaving terribly well.
Right, well, that's interesting information, Nick, because he's been pretty well backed over here in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
He's about an 11-2 shot.
You can kind of see why, can't you? You can kind of see why.
Yeah.
He's had a good prep for it. He's moving forward. He's trained by the guy who trains Orfevre, who clearly knows what he's doing. And, yeah, you'd be quite hopeful of a big run. But it's one of these races, I don't know what you think, but it's one of these races I keep saying to somebody, if you can make a really cogent case for a horse for me, I'll buy it, because I can't really get that enthused about the chances of ours.
Yeah, I remember on Oaks Day you asking me when we were summing up after racing what I felt about the performance of St Nicholas Abbey, and I said, well, don't worry about anything else for the rest of the season. He'll win the Breeders' Cup Turf, so I'm hoping he does.
Yeah, I hope he does. And I suppose, he looked like quite an explosive horse with the Lasix last year, didn't he? And you think, well, that might bring him right up to his best, right on the top of his game. But I don't suppose either you or I anticipated on Coronation Cup Day that quite as much water would flow under the bridge between then and now. And I suppose that's the only thing that slightly issues a note of caution.
Yeah, Nick, what about the Breeders' Cup Classic this year? Game On Dude's going to be the short price favourite, and the well-documented jockey switch, Chantal Sutherland off and now retired, Bejarano on, and he got a great tune out of Game On Dude last time at Santa Anita. A horse that loves the track. Everything seems in place for him, doesn't it?
I think he's going to win, really. You try and slice the race open and make cases for some of the outsiders, but I don't think there's that much depth, and I think he's over them in terms of class. And the only doubt is that the triple stretch him a little bit, but it's likely to be a speed favouring track the way they prepare it. He's much more tractable this year than he was last year. Clearly, the jockey switch already has and is going to bring about further improvement. I think he'll hang on. I think Mucho Macho Man will be charging at him quite hard late, but I'm just not sure that he'll be able to claw back the deficit, because he hasn't got as much tactical speed as Game On Dude. I was actually having a chat with Bob Baffert about 20 minutes before I spoke to you, and he's feeling a little under the weather. He's got a stomach bug at the moment, but I suspect that Game On Dude will give him something to cheer about. It's the 20th anniversary of Baffert's first Breeders' Cup winner with 30 slews, and he has had a tremendous meet here at Santa Anita. There's headlines this season that he's been very unlucky in all the Triple Crown races, and it's been close but no cigar, but he won 4 of the Grade 1 races on the opening day of this fixture, and he's going at about 30-31%, and he's just got stacks of fancied runners. It's almost impossible not to think that he's not going to have a load of winners. Yeah.
I thought Fort Larn might run quite well. I thought he was better suited to Saratoga than he was Belmont last time. I thought he might be the one to give Game On Dude plenty to think about. But let's just move on, Nick. How have the American trainers taken to the fact that their 2-year-olds will not be running on Lasix? Is this an issue that is likely to dominate the Breeders' Cup this year rather than the performances that we're going to see?
Well, if Feeling Kitty wins the juvenile sprint, you'll know it will. Yeah, because you look down the list of all those juvenile races, and 95% of the American runners are coming off Lasix for the first time. It's bizarre, isn't it? You'd think if you'd been preparing a horse for the Breeders' Cup all season, and you knew that you weren't going to be able to run on Lasix, you might have prepared with no Lasix. But I suppose this might tell us exactly how important Lasix is. You almost want some of these American horses coming off Lasix to win and produce career-best performances, because then that might, give light to the fact that Lasix is an extremely important addition to a horse's training regimen. It's clearly an extremely emotive issue. I was talking to Jerry Bailey about this yesterday, who's part of the NBC broadcast team, and he was saying when he went out to ride a horse never broke down underneath him because he was equipped with Lasix. He said he'd much rather painkillers and other legally administrable medications were taken off the list before Lasix. He doesn't feel it's quite as big an issue in terms of safety to horses and jockeys as some of the other drugs that you are legitimately allowed to give horses to race on in the United States. But it is the most emotive one, because there's all sorts of suggestions that Lasix can mask other substances or whatever that are largely unsubstantiated in truth.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? It's going to give trainers ready-made excuses when horses are beaten.
Yeah, it is going to be a big deal, though, to answer your question.
Yeah.
It'll be covered fairly extensively, I think.
Yeah. Nick, as far as...
You ask these European trainers about it, and they say, "Oh, it's not going to make any difference. Yeah, it's not going to alter the result. It doesn't give us an inbuilt advantage." And then you say to them, "Well, hang on a minute. If it's not, then why are you running your horses on it in the older horse races?" You know. Yeah. If you're that confident, so there's so many complexities involved with discussing that issue.
Yeah, indeed. I think it looks set to dominate. It's going to run and run, and of course, no Lasix next year. Full stop in any of the races.
Precisely.
Yeah, let's just talk about some of the other horses that you've been able to get a look at in the morning, European and otherwise, and perhaps the vibes that you've been picking up down the back stretch. Can you point us in the direction of a few horses, maybe at prices that people are talking about that have been working well or that you fancy?
Well, there's a horse running in the downhill sprint race called Renee's Got Zip. Who's a fairly lightly raced filly relative to most of the pretty grizzled old campaigners that are running in that race. Been working extremely well and has caught the eye of more than one or two seasoned observers. Juvenile filly's turf, filly called Spring Venture, where you'll know all about her. She's right at the top of the market. She brings forward some terrific form from a race in Canada, and she looked really very good. Our juvenile turf fillies, of course, are headed by the Richard Hannon-trained Sky Lantern, the Group 1 Moyglare winner. I don't think that she's got as good a chance as the market necessarily suggests, and I'd be very fearful of Spring Venture. The way she quickened up through horses last time at Woodbine was seriously impressive. She's been doing really well. Mark Cassie's got 2 or 3 good chances over the 2 days, and I'd be sweet on her chances for sure. I saw Geronimo out this morning. He's outside of the mile. I thought looked in good shape, but frankly, you can't really see beyond the front 3 in the mile race. And John Sadler is very keen on his filly for the filly and mare turf against the Europeans.
Okay. One of my strong fancies, not at a big price, is Royal Delta to win the Ladies' Classic again. Is she fancied?
Yeah, she's had a couple of problems this week. It's not been straightforward for Bill Mott. They were late out of New York because of Hurricane Sandy, and then she got a laceration on the plane over, and it's needed 6 stitches. And they've had to treat that. She'll be fine to run, but she will be running with 6 stitches in, and that would just temper your confidence slightly, particularly as it's such a deep group of fillies. It's a terrific race with Questing and My Miss Aurelia and Orson Feather in there. Well,
that's really good information that she's sustained a cut on the plane on the way over. Nick, how many European winners do you think we will have?
3 would be my
right.
guess. I think. Well, I was doing a piece for HRTV the other day, and they were saying, over under is 4, and I thought, well, if you think we're going to have 4 winners, we kind of got to win everything we might. We kind of got to win all the races we should do. If the Lasix issue comes into play, then it could go silly, and we could have 4 or 5.
Right.
But I think 3 is a par figure. I think if we walked away with 3, we should be pleased. People say, but there's 15 races and so on and so forth, but we're not really giving any of the dirt races a proper shot, so you can rule out most of them.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think be a sort of seller at 5. Nick, thanks very much indeed. Some interesting info, particularly about Royal Delta. I'm going to let you go because I understand you've got a date with Mr. Cunningham in the Velvet Lounge.
He's been on great form this week. He's all over this event.
He absolutely loves it. I was reading a piece from him where he said that you went out for a drink together, and you picked up the tab for a pale ale in a grotty bar somewhere, and you went back to the hotel and had a glass of wine in the hotel, and he had to pick the tab up for that, and it was $35 a glass.
$35 for 2 glasses of wine.
Stitched him right up there, lucky.
Cheap in California, that's for sure. He wasn't happy. He went to a whiter shade of pale, I can assure you.
I suspect you don't have to pay 18 quid for 2 glasses of wine in Wigan.
Exactly that. But he has managed to bag several more free passes for all his northwest-based chums for the media shindig this evening. So he's on good terms with himself again now.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And you sound like you are as well, Nick. Continue to enjoy the next few days. It's good to talk to you.
Thanks, Angus.